very much. I'd like to invite our panelists to come down. You can come down at the same time, or whatever you want. Our first panelist is Matt Comi, who's from Big Bucket Software. He's recently developed and released the incident for iOS devices, so that's iPhone, iPad, and iPod. It's a great game. It looks fantastic. Definitely try it out. Saxon Druce from Binary Space. He's developed a game called Class 3 Outbreak, and before that, a zombie outbreak simulator, which actually ran on top of, it pulled in maps from Google Maps and simulated what it would be like if zombies took over the world, I guess, or tried to. The game was featured on the National Geographic website to tie into one of their documentary series. Andrew Hawkins from DrawFX, and he also teaches at TAFE. He made an iPhone game called Surf Prodigy. He's a very keen surfer, so I think that translated well into the mechanics of the game. Cameron Royal from Sandbox Software. He develops on pretty much every platform. Cam is an exceptional programmer for PC, iOS devices, and web. This is a screenshot of his snowboarding game called Adrenaline Snowboarding. Incidentally, there are 3 iPhone snowboarding games which have come out of Perth. I don't know if it's because we're quite distant from...
I've also never been snowboarding, so
yeah.
How does that work?
We're quite distant from snow, maybe it's something which appeals. And finally, Crystal Lee Whipper, who works at Different Methods, runs Different Methods, with Simon, who's here as well. They work on various secret projects for big industries and the educational sector. So we pulled they can't post about a lot of their confidential projects, but Simon does post a lot of things that he's trying out on his blog. So we picked out one of these images that he had from one of his...
It's the best track I've ever seen.
It is the best track I've ever seen. So, welcome to our panelists. I guess we'll take questions from anybody, anything about games, or anything that's particular to any particular panelist. Yes.
I'll open up a little bit of a tricky question. How would you guys see the industry at the moment? You're all from different parts, some commercial, some independent, teaching, studying, whatever. How would you see the current industry, games industry at the moment? Of course, we all know what to Interzone. There's all kinds of stories with that. How are you guys feeling? And also, what interest is there from major developers in Perth at the moment?
Okay, so I'll just try to recap the question. That's
Sure.
basically, how do you see the Perth industry at the moment, and what interest is there in major industry players in Perth? So I will put that to Saxon Druce.
Can everybody hear me, or do I need to use a mic? I think the industry is pretty small. It's very, like, the Interzone grew very big very quickly for a while and then disappeared. And I think at the moment a lot of people, the scene is very sort of independent. A lot of people doing stuff in their spare time, that kind of thing. There are a few people who managed to make a full-time career out of it, but personally I have a day job and then do game development for fun and make a little bit on the side. So I think there's quite a lot of that. Matt here is making a living from game development. There's a lot of that sort of building from grassroots. I think that's where the scene is at the moment. I don't think there's a lot of big players, big publishers, or anything like that looking at Perth at the moment.
Anybody like to add to that?
Yeah, I guess it's like the question. I think it was kind of it was asked specifically regarding sort of large companies and the industry in a more sort of corporate sense, whereas what sort of, I don't know, some of us are doing is managing to succeed without needing that sort of backing. And so I started out in my spare time, and I mean the incident was done generally just after hours. Towards the end of it, I haven't sort of described this properly before, but towards the end of the development, I did start to taper off from my day job because I was going to go that way one way or another. I was either going to move on or make it my full-time gig. And fortunately, it was able to become my full-time gig. So I guess what I'm trying to say is there is opportunity to do it on your own. And I can't really speak for what kind of big business interest there is. I think a lot of people got scared off from the Interzone sort of story, but other than that, I guess it just means that you don't need to worry about it if you want to stay small, at least to begin with.
Yep, so I worked at Interzone for almost 3 years, and then done some independent stuff as well. So it's interesting. I think Interzone was a fantastic opportunity. It was unfortunately disappeared, and there's been other quite large studios closing up shop over east as well, worldwide. It's just that kind of. It is a very volatile industry when there's big money involved. In terms of, I think the difference being between what we've got at the moment and what you're talking about is large external finance from venture capital funds or from pre-arranged deals with larger publishers, and to my knowledge there's nothing like that.
There are 3 different venture capitalist funds that have opened up in the last 3 months.
They're looking, yeah, but at the moment in terms of anything on the scale that Interzone was or other big studios, not at the moment, but there's definitely skill sets here for people who are looking to start up larger studios. It's a very different kind of developer though. You can get some very, very talented artists and very talented programmers in that, but without the entrepreneurial flair, it makes it very difficult to do the independent thing. I think that's a different caliber of game developer. So I wouldn't judge the size of the available resources here to do development purely on the independent scene, because I think it's a skill set outside of that. But it'd be interesting to see if anybody is looking to set up here.
Yeah, I just wanted to add something else. I've never really understood how a large company could really survive for more than 1 or 2 massive hits because of the resources and the infrastructure and the financial burden that the company goes under. And so now we're at a point, we can see the evidence of that, a lot of companies going down. Now we're at a point where we've got this large indie scene and the capabilities of putting out to smaller devices, and there's a homebrew scene as well. Pretty much changing the course of game development. People aren't under pressure to produce the next Quake clone or whatever, or that sort of thing, where you end up with a version 5 or 6 of a game. In the indie scene, we're able to work on the games that we really want to make. And there are also people out there that are more in touch with the idea of that someone local could possibly realise their idea for them. So I don't know about you guys, but I've sort of been approached by quite a lot of people over the last 12 to 18 months about doing projects, and I'm just sort of flat out from that sort of thing, responding. For example, I've got a game that I want to put out, and at the moment I'm sitting on 2 other games that I'm helping other people with, because people just suddenly realise we have the capabilities to make this stuff ourselves. We don't have to compete with this massive market anymore. So yeah, it's interesting from a cultural point of view how the indie scene has changed, the roadmap for games in general.
Okay.
How has the online sales model, like say iPhone apps and also selling on Steam or whatever, I mean, does that sort of take away a lot of the costs that would have been absorbed in marketing? I mean, it's the fact that there's a store that you can just put it in that everyone can access. How has that changed the scene, do you think?
I think when it was new, particularly, I mean, I can only really speak for the App Store, marketing wasn't a big deal because you were one of the first, like actually I remember my first app was very early on when the App Store was just released, and it wasn't a game, but it got into the top 100 on the first day, and that means something today, but back then it didn't really, so it was really exciting, but it didn't mean what you would expect it to mean if that would have happened today, right? So back then marketing was not an issue because you were right there front and center, and people were buying, but there weren't that many people. Whereas nowadays you don't have to worry about publishing, and you don't have to worry about taking credit card payments, but you do still have to worry about getting getting the word out there. So yeah, that's still a concern, and that is still something like, as far as the skill set of a indie developer requires, you have to keep that in mind. Just that, you know, when you find yourself closing in on release, you really have to make sure all your marketing material is ready as well. So yeah, there's that.
I think online distribution is lowering the barrier for entry into publishing, where 10 years ago you want to make a game, you have to put it on console and there's a QA process and there's hundreds of thousands of dollars involved in setting all that up. So now it's great that one person on their own can release a game and actually have financial success with it, rather than just sort of being fun and cult but free and not really making any money. So that's what Steam and App Store and even just publishing to the web and having your own, you know, little store, it's all very easy to set up these days.
I think that kind of works both ways. It's easy for you to publish, but that means it's easy for everyone to publish. So there's so much content out there, you really have to be noticed somehow get your word out there so people will come to you.
You need to have a good game.
Yep.
But then the economy's changed as well. It's like everyone's so fussy about what they're going to spend their next dollar on. You know, it's $1. You know, you lose that more than that down the back of your couch. So it's really strange that people have decided that. And you see it in forums. You're like, don't waste your dollar on this game. That sort of thing.
Buy a cup of coffee and think of
Yeah.
it.
I'm going to put the flip side of that question to Crystal Lee, because unlike most of the other panelists who are kind of developing games and then getting them out and then cash flowing, I want to find out more about what Different Methods is doing, because it's quite a different approach.
Well, we basically have a fee-for-service game that we're developing at the moment. So we've been approached and asked to create a game. It's an educational game, so it's actually at the stage where we test in schools this week in the eastern states. So we've been quite fortunate from that point of view, where we've been bankrolled from the beginning in order to go through the development process and also get to the point where we're publishing there. So it's a bit of a different kettle of fish to these guys and what they're going through.